Hello guys, welcome back to the Combat Room MMA. Today we're joined by Brady Hiestand, the Ultimate Fighter, Season 29 finalist, and he's currently on a three-fight win streak in the UFC bantamweight division. Brady, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm just making this podcast, trying
Nice.
to talk to you.
You interviewed my buddy Terrence McKinney.
Yeah, that was actually my first episode with him, I DM'd him on Instagram as well, he responded.
Hey, that's cool. Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah, we both grew up here in Spokane. He's down in Florida now, but he's a good dude.
Do you train at the same MMA gym as him?
I used to when he was up here in Spokane. We both trained at the Sick Jitsu.
Was that
Um, but now he moved away.
was that before he switched training camps?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
right
How come?
right before he got in the UFC.
So how come he switched training camps?
I don't know. He's a wild dude. He's probably just doing he's a very social guy, so he's probably exploring other gyms, found everyone has a different way in this sport,
And
They
he
they
moved to
find their way.
Florida.
Yeah, exactly. But he has a family now. He's got a wife and kids, and so who knows?
I met the wife in Miami. Or...
Hey, you can't ever meet a Miami chick. It never works out. Ask Ilya Taporia.
Anyways, so uh, how did you first get into MMA?
Um, so I started jiu-jitsu when I was 12, and so I didn't really like a lot of other sports. I was too short, fat, and white. So, um, but I found jujitsu and I actually started being really good at it. So I found love, became obsessed, and then a lot of the guys in my jujitsu gym fought MMA. So when I was 16, had my first cage fight, and the rest is history.
So did you get picked on a lot as a kid? Since you described yourself with those characteristics.
I did, but I was like a kid that would get picked on, but didn't take it well, and so I ended up in a lot of like arguments and fights and stuff. I didn't win them all when I was super young, and I had a big older brother, and so he would whoop on me too. So I was really good at getting beat up, and so when I finally learned how to fight, kind of paired well together.
So how were you in school? Overall?
Are you talking about like academic or?
Yeah, academic.
I was pretty good. I didn't really try. I kind of was able to get by with minimal effort, and so that's kind of what I did. I didn't really put a lot of effort into school, but I did enough to pass and make sure I kept the teachers off of me. It was and but I just loved training, and so once I started finding MMA and jiu-jitsu when I was 12, I would just do school just enough to get out of school to go train and start teaching kids jiu-jitsu and adult jiu-jitsu when I was 15. So it kind of became my life.
So were you planning on becoming a jiu-jitsu coach before doing full-time MMA?
I actually was doing that for a while, and then I was part owner in a gym, but I actually was before I got into the UFC, I was a resident firefighter, and so that was kind of like what I was thinking my career path was going to be a firefighter. So I lived at the fire station for 3 years, was doing all the
Wow.
schooling for that, and then got the call to the Ultimate Fighter and kind of changed my trajectory.
So how did you get into firefighting? That's a bit of a opposite choice from, being a fighter, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I looked up to Stipe Miocic, who was a firefighter, UFC fighter for a number of years, and like I said, I didn't really like school a whole lot. I told myself really young I never was gonna have a desk job, and so that's why I really fell in love with fighting. But firefighting is the same deal. It's one of those jobs you don't need to be behind a desk and anything like that. Plus, I
Yeah.
grew up with a mom who was a doctor, and her husband is a retired firefighter. And so I always heard stories about it and always sounded really cool. So when I was 18, I decided to, apply to be a resident, and I got the job, and so I lived there full time, and it was fun. I still love it. I still volunteer now every once in a while.
So, when you were younger, who was the biggest influence as developing you into the fighter you are today?
Outside of the actual sport, I would say my mom. She's from Montana, like old Montana. And if you guys know what Montana is, it's like a rough and tough state. A lot of like hicks, a lot of hunters, backpackers, all that stuff. And so she's always been a really tough individual. She didn't really get let me get away with a whole lot of shit growing up, and if I ever got hurt, she would tell me to quit being a pussy. And so she actually was the first person that got me into boxing, because before I started jiu-jitsu, I went to a boxing class with my mom. She was like paying for private lessons, and so I went with her, met the coach, and then I started boxing from there. And then shortly after, found jiu-jitsu, and then fell in love with jiu-jitsu.
So do you think that toughened you up, like gave you the right mindset to be a fighter?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people they grow up with a mom that's like super over coddling, which she was a great mom. She did anything we needed, but she definitely made us really tough for sure.
So at one point did you realize you could make it as a career as an MMA fighter?
I think I never really knew. I always performed really well. Like I feel like when I started beating up all the older guys when I was 16 in the gym, all the full-grown men, kind of gave me a lot of confidence, that the sport gave me a lot of confidence that I didn't have. And then once I started fighting, I won almost all my fights. And when I did lose, it was just because of just random things. It was never like I got beat because I wasn't good enough. So just every time I went out there and competed, I would go whoop these dudes. I remember probably the first fight that made me know that I was actually really good is I went against this three-time state champion wrestler, and I never wrestled before. And it was like my last amateur, second to last amateur fight. And I remember I was getting ready for this fight, I walked out, and the ref, like out of nowhere, I didn't know anything about this dude. He's like, "Yeah, dude, this good dude's tough. He's a three-time state champion wrestler." And I was like, "What the fuck? Why did they send me to fight this dude? He's like 25 years old, former state champion wrestler, and he's looking to go pro." And then I went out there and I choked him out in the first round. So
You
I'd
choked
say
out a
that was
grappler.
probably, yeah, exactly. I took him down too. He tried to take me down like three times. I defended him off the cage, ended up getting a takedown of my own, took his back and choked him out. And so knowing like after going with those guys, like a guy like that and all the guys in my gym, I feel like it just gave me confidence. Like, dang, I never wrestled before and I just out wrestled this guy that's elite. So
So that gave you the confidence to know you could take on the best.
exactly. And even every time I've performed, it gives me all new level of confidence. I got on the Ultimate Fighter and I was like, I fought locally, beat all the guys locally, and then I went on the show and I'm like, I don't know how good I am. A lot of these guys come in with confidence and they're like, I can beat anybody. And going to that show, I was like, I don't know. I went in with like hella nerves. I knew I could do it just because I have a strong mentality, but I was nervous as hell for sure. But then I went and fought this guy who's actually from Spokane, who's 10 years older than me, had like four times as many fights. He fought Marlon Moraes in his prime, took him to decision, lost by split decision, something like that. And he was my first fight on the show. And I'm going out there and beating him. And after that, I was like, dude, I can fight anybody. He was the biggest name that I had ever heard of from my area at my weight class. And so going out there and beating him gave me all the confidence in the world.
So was he like a local legend for you back in the days?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he was one of those guys that everyone's like, why isn't he in the UFC? How the hell is this guy not in the UFC yet? And then he got his shot, and unfortunately, I had to take it away from him.
So what was but I thought even if you don't win the Ultimate Fighter, you could still get to the UFC. Like,
Sometimes, a lot of guys, if they make it to the semifinals, they usually get a shot. If they have a really good performance, but who knows? He didn't end up getting a shot. He was a little bit older. I think he was like 31 on the show and losing to a 21-year-old. I'm not sure, but I know pretty much everyone from my season got a shot besides him.
so when you were younger and you were fighting on the regional scenes, what was the biggest challenges you were facing at the time?
That's a good question. I think the biggest challenge is like outside of the ring. I'm a busybody. I always like doing something. And so when I was the biggest wake up call for me outside of the UFC was my first ever loss. Because I was taking fights whenever, I was fighting whoever. I was a 19-year-old kid. I didn't really care. And I just was winning all my fights. So I had all the confidence in the world. And I remember I was running a gym at the time. I was in college. I had a bad relationship, and I was volunteering as a firefighter, and I was like, I can do it all. And I remember going into that fight, and I was undertrained. I took it on 3 weeks' notice, and I just had too much on my plate. And I remember going out there, and it was a close fight. I thought I almost won, and I ended up losing that fight against a guy on an 8 fight win streak. And it really woke me up and realized that if I'm gonna go into this sport, I got to go all in. I can't have my hands in too many baskets, if that makes sense. So that really woke me up. And then 2 fights later, I got into the UFC. So I think the biggest challenge wasn't ever because I love training. I love going to the gym. I love pushing myself, seeing how good I can get. I think the main thing is just making sure that I stay focused, which I am now, and um, putting my whole heart into the sport. And I think that's ever since then I've had nothing but success.
So, how did you end up balancing training with UFC or your regional MMA life?
I think there really is no balance. There's no balance, honestly. If you're trying to be in the best at something, just like if you're trying to do a podcast, it's like you can't have it you can't have your cake and eat it too. You know what I'm saying? You gotta have the home life that you enjoy, but if you're gonna be elite, if you're gonna be the best at something, it's gotta take over your whole life.
Well,
So
with some fighters or athletes, that's a downfall for them because you saw what happened with TJ Dillashaw, you know what I mean?
yeah, with his injuries, you mean?
Yeah, and then I think he got a bit, overstretching trying to cut down to 125, So do you
Well,
think
that's
there
another
has to be
part.
a,
That's another part is not only is being a fighter about training, it's also about taking care of your body. Because you can train your body, you can learn all the techniques, but if your body's breaking on you, you're not going to have success because you're not going to be able to get out there. And then when you do get out there, you're going to be half the person you could be because you're breaking yourself down. So that's another big part is learning how to manage injuries, prevent injuries, and take care of your body and brain.
so how do you recover, what's your hobbies outside of the UFC?
So luckily I got some good sponsors here in Spokane. We got like Core Regenerate. They do a lot of recovery stuff. Actually, I don't do anything. I grew up
Uh,
with a lot of addiction in my family. So I got like my dad who was an alcoholic. He ended up passing away. I had some other family members. So actually I'm the lamest dude you ever meet. I maybe drink like 4 times a year and that's about it.
no, I thought you had your own cigar sponsor or something.
No, I don't. No.
Oh, okay. So like
Hey,
how do you guys
I'll throw in a Zin every once in a while.
anyway, so seeing all those addictions happening around you, did that naturally keep you away from it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I feel like just seeing it a lot in my life and seeing what it can do to people, it just kind of turned me off on it. I ain't up against it, and I know a lot of people, do it safely and all that stuff, but it's just not for me to be doing that stuff all the time.
Is that something you think all fighters need to stay, all athletes or fighters need to stay away from in general?
No, I don't think so. I think some people it does good for them. I know some guys that they need to let loose or they go crazy, and it's kind of like it helps them perform better. Obviously, pairing a bunch of alcohol with getting knocked out is not healthy. Or
Yeah.
getting brain damage plus a bunch of drugs and alcohol isn't probably the best combination. But if you do it safely and it works for you, then it works for you.
So after fighting regionally and finally getting that call up to the Ultimate Fight, how did that opportunity come?
Yeah. So it was during COVID. We had a really weird season of the Ultimate Fighter. It was supposed to start like 4 months before it did, but COVID kind of pushed it back. But I saw the application. My coach and a couple of my mentors, like Juliana Pena and Mike Chiesa, sent me the link. I applied. They put in a good word for me. Did a couple interviews and flew me out to Vegas, and then we know what happened next.
So the whole process, like how nervy were you feeling when the selection process started?
Yeah, I was nervous. I thought, I was like pretty high on myself. I'm like, yeah, I'm 21 at the time, and I was like, dude, feel like I can outgrapple all these guys. I'm big, I'm strong, and then it was definitely nerve wracking. Though I initially wanted to be on Ortega's team,
Hmm.
believe it or not,
Because I
because
was
I was
thinking,
like, because he kind of matches my style. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He's
Yeah.
tall and lengthy for the division, so I was like, dude, this guy's the perfect for me. But then I got picked for Volk, and I couldn't have been happier in the long run. Looking back on it, I'm glad I was with Volk.
So, do you think fighters do you think they secretly want to be on one fighter's team and then they're a bit disappointed when they're chosen by the other fighter?
I wasn't like I was just stoked to be there. I was happy for whatever happened. I was leaning towards Ortega because of like I feel like our skills matched up better. I was more pissed off because I was actually like the second to last pick. And so I was offended. I was like, these motherfuckers thought I wasn't that good, going into it. So that was more what was like put me down a little bit was like the fact that I was second to last pick. The only reason I wasn't the last, I think, was because there was a fat guy behind me.
Well, don't they give you an initial fight and based on that performance, they decide who they want, who they want to select?
So since my season was COVID, they couldn't do that because they couldn't have that many people down there.
So the coaches just have to look at your fight history or just based on what you look like.
Yeah, they just look at fight history. They do a little like selection process where they put us each through a workout and they kind of pick based on that.
So, well, you just stop halfway through them up. So
Yeah, I guess so. I thought I was putting in the work, but I don't know. I guess not.
what was your mindset going into the show compared to, normal fight prep?
I talked with Mike Chiesa, like I said earlier, and Juliana Pena, but the main thing is when you're in there, everything happens so fast. You're fighting every 2 weeks, but you got to focus on the next fight ahead. You can't look at the competition as a whole. You just got to focus on what's next. And so you're cutting weight every other week, you're fighting every other week, but the main thing is you just got to stay in the present moment, focus on the task at hand, and that's just your next fight.
So how long does it take to film a Ultimate Fighter season?
For me, it was like 3 months. And then you go back, you get a train camp, and then you fight in the finale like I did.
So, how often do you fight then? Like in those 3 months, is it like once every month?
For me, it was once every 3 weeks.
And you're cutting weight in between that, like 20 pounds.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
And I was nervous because I went in, I made sure my weight was right, and then I fought Josh my first fight, and then afterwards I was celebrating. I'm like, fuck yeah, I won. I get a day or two break. Then that night I went and ate food. Josh made me a drink. We like squashed our beef because we just fought, everything like that. And I remember 2 days later I woke up at like 161. And I fight at
well,
135. And so I was like, I was stressing. And you're in the house, you don't get your phone. So you're not allowed to talk to anybody. You're not allowed to read books. And so for like 2 days straight, I was having like panic attacks. I'm like, holy shit, I'm not going to make weight. Freaking out. Luckily, I was able to get the weight down and I made weight pretty easily.
how's that medically allowed? Cutting weight every 3 weeks to 20 pounds.
They get around it. They're exhibitions, so they're not real fights. So that's how they get around it.
Oh, okay. But if it was a real match, that wouldn't normally be allowed.
I don't know, maybe. They still allow it in the UFC. Like you saw Hamza, I think he fought like 2 weeks or a week after his one of his fights.
Well, I mean, doing it 3 times every 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely not good for the body.
So, what
But
surprised you most?
this sport's not really good for the body anyway. So
So, what surprised you most about living in the Ultimate Fighter house?
I think what was surprising is how cool everyone was. You're going in this fight house and you think everyone's gonna be like a dick because all getting ready to fight each other. But I made some lifelong friends being in that house. Like Brian Battle, still one of my good friends. Mitch Raposo, still one of my good friends. Ludovic, he was on the other team. Josh Reddinghouse, I still talk to him every once in a while. It's kind of cool that you get to meet these cool people, even though you guys are fighting for your spot.
You know, when you look at the Ultimate Fighter on YouTube or something, it looks like is any of it scripted or is that all real? All those emotions.
No, it's all real. They might put you in stressful situations, but they don't tell you to act any certain way. I think that's one thing that people always think. They're always like, "Oh, they made that up," or they were told to say that, but that's not true. Like you got to realize that usually people that fight are just crazy motherfuckers. And so you put up enough crazy motherfuckers in a house together and take away their phones, their books, women, they start going nuts.
Did they give you the alcohol on purpose, It's,
Yeah, they don't force it to you, but anytime you ask, they'll bring whatever you want.
so, do any of the fighters, act up on camera just to make themselves, look look more aggressive or present themselves differently?
Oh, I think for sure. I think there's definitely guys out there they're like thinking this is their chance. And so they go into it being like, I'm gonna put on a show. Which is not a bad idea. That's how you gain fans. So me, I my whole goal going into it was just to let my performances be for myself, and then I was just gonna be true to myself. Be who I am. And if you like me, you like me. If you don't, fuck off.
So, how does the actual training camp work, with going into each fight?
In the house?
Because, when you get the match up, do they coach you one on one or because don't you train in groups?
Yeah, so I mean, like they split you into teams, and so when you find your matchup, you just go. It's just like a normal training camp, just shortened. You just go back to your. You just go to training. We train twice a day, every day, and so you go in, you create a game plan with the coaches you have, train with the partners you have, and you go from there.
Okay. And after that finale, since he lost, what was that feeling like for you?
Oh, it's terrible. I went in there like believing that I was gonna win, and honestly, I thought I won. I think I had like something crazy like 9 or 10 minutes of control time, and I didn't feel like I took a lot of damage. I felt like I controlled most of the match, and when I did get control, maybe had some rabbit punches, but they gave it to Ricky, so it is what it is. I was pretty hurt, but I was happy I got a contract, and I knew I was going to grow from it. I was still young at the time. I was 22, and so I knew I was just going to come back and get better. And my whole goal is whenever I've lost, it was just I got to make up for it. If I lose once, I got to go win five in a row to make up for it.
What was the biggest life experience you took from being the Ultimate Fighter?
Honestly, it was training with Volk and seeing how he functions with his guys. He created such a good team with all the guys. This is an individual sport, but you can't do it alone. You need good guys around you. You need good training partners. You need good coaches. And so that in part has to do with how you interact with everybody and creating those bonds with those people because they're going to help you. You're not going to get there on your own. So seeing how he functions with his team, how he built such a crazy team, and how they all treat each other was the main thing, I think.
So, how was it like training with Volt? Because, he's a really good technical fighter and all that.
He's fucking on point. He's good everywhere. And it's been a few years. I think it's been almost 4 years since I was on the show. And dude, I can tell he's got better. His grappling's way better than he used to be working with Craig Jones. But he's a freak. And he's so mentally tough. And I think that's what really does it for him. He's so mentally tough in his training and in his fights. That's why he
Was
has so
he a,
much success.
was he a nutrition coach too?
Hell no. Dude, that guy likes to eat. That guy, we. That's the thing is, I like to eat too. So he was cooking up a feast, and he wasn't cutting weight, so it was hard because he was cooking such good food. I was like, fuck.
Well,
But
so he was actually cooking on the show as well.
yeah, he came over and grilled a couple times. One of the challenges we won a sushi chef, and they came to the house and cooked us a bunch of sushi. It was awesome.
So, a couple of last questions for you. How did how did life change for you once you officially became a UFC fighter? Was there any habits you had to cut or you had to change mentally?
I think when I got the actual UFC contract, I just realized that there's no fucking around anymore. Like if I'm gonna go fight the best in the world, I gotta train. I gotta live like the best in the world. So that means when I wake up, I gotta make sure everything I'm doing is to make myself better. Before I got in the UFC, I think I was a little bit more relaxed. I didn't really outside of camp. I wasn't as diligent. I still get a little bit wild out of camp, more with food or whatever. But I think I just locked in more and kind of became more of a professional, I guess.
And one last question for you before we go. since it's December 31st when we're filming this, what's your goals going into 2026?
That's funny. Me and my girl were just writing down our 2026 goals last night, but I have a bunch. I think I have a lot that I want to do. The main thing is I want 3 fights, 3 wins this year. I want to make sure that I'm active. I want to be in the rankings, and I want to make a mark in the sport this year. I want to grow my social media, and start making some money, in a business of some sort, whether it's like promoting a brand or something like that. I'm trying to build myself into a professional in all aspects. So, main thing number one is I want 3 fights, 3 wins. Throw in a couple bonuses. I'm down with that, and put myself in a position to buy my second house.
So what was the reason you haven't fought in a long time? Because,
I,
on your
I,
record.
yeah. So my last fight was almost a year and a half ago. Is because I had ACL surgery. So I was supposed to fight Jake Hadley last year around this time, and ended up tearing my ACL. And that goes back into being professional. I got to make sure that I take care of my body. I'm a guy that you don't ever have to tell him to train more. If anything, I got to train less and focus on the recovery aspect. So I've been out because I tore my ACL. Luckily, rehab's been great. Got it all fixed up, feeling good. Weight's coming down, getting ready to perform again.
Brady, I'm looking forward to seeing you fight in 2026, see you get in the bantamweight rankings and, sort my rab out, bro, because, someone's got to sort him out more than he's already been sorted out. So, I'd love to have you on again sometime.